Sometimes the hardest journey isn't the miles you travel, but the road back to what you left behind. For 30 years, James Caldwell told himself he'd made peace with his choices. He rides back to his old Wyoming cabin, expecting ghosts and silence. Instead, smoke rises from the chimney. Horses stand in the corral. Someone is living in his house. Inside, he finds a woman's shawl, a child's toy, and a letter with his name, 20 years old. The woman he left behind raised a daughter he never knew. That daughter now calls his cabin home. She doesn't know her father just walked through the door. What do you say to a child you abandoned before she was born? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dawn came soft over the valley, painting the grassland in shades of amber and gold. James Caldwell sat his horse at the ridgeline, looking down at a place he thought he'd forgotten. 30 years had passed since he'd last seen this view, but his body remembered it like a familiar prayer. The creek still wound through the meadow like a silver thread. The pine forest still climbed the eastern slope in dark waves, and there, nestled against the protection of the hillside, stood the cabin he'd built with his own hands in the summer of 1835. He was 62 years old now, though he felt older. His beard had gone entirely grey, and his hands bore the scars of 3 decades spent alone in the mountains. His pack-horse carried everything he owned: bedroll, rifle traps, a few cooking implements, and the worn leather saddlebags that held his tobacco and coffee. He'd lived light all these years, moving with the seasons, following the game, answering to no one. But the mountains had grown lonely. He nudged his horse forward, descending the slope with care. The animal picked its way through the sage and bunch grass, and James let his mind drift backward to the man he'd been when he first came to this valley. 28 years old then, full of ambition and restless energy. He'd wanted land of his own, a place where he could prove himself. He'd spent that entire summer cutting timber, notching logs, raising walls. The work had been brutal and satisfying in equal measure. The cabin had taken shape beneath his hands. He'd built it strong, with thick walls to hold against the winter wind. The door he'd carved from a single plank of pine, fitting it so carefully that it hung true and closed tight. He'd even carved his initials into the wood, J.C., deep enough to last. That door had been a promise to himself, a declaration that he was done wandering, ready to settle. He'd been wrong about that. Sarah Mills had arrived in the valley that autumn, traveling with her brother's family, who'd claimed land 5 miles north. She was 23, dark-haired, with eyes the color of creek water. James had seen her at the trading post and felt something shift inside his chest. They'd courted through that winter, if you could call it courting. Mostly they'd talked. Long conversations by firelight, sharing stories and dreams. She'd made him laugh, made him think about a future that included more than just survival. By spring, he'd asked her to marry him. She'd said yes. They'd planned a summer wedding. But as the days grew longer and the snow melted from the high passes, that old restlessness had crept back into James's bones. The mountains called to him. The frontier whispered promises of fortune and freedom. He'd told himself he'd make one more trip, one more season trapping, bring back enough pelts to secure their future. Sarah had begged him not to go, said they had enough, said she didn't need wealth, only him. But James had been young and foolish and certain of his own plans. He'd kissed her goodbye on a May morning, promised to return before autumn, and ridden west toward the high country. He'd never come back. Oh, he'd meant to. That first year he'd done well with his traps, made good money. But by the time autumn arrived, he'd partnered with another trapper named Clayton Webb, and they'd decided to push further west, chase the rumors of virgin territory where beaver were thick as flies. One season became 2, 2 became 5. The years slipped past like water through his fingers. He told himself Sarah would have moved on, found someone better. Told himself she was probably married with children, living a good life. Told himself it was better this way. She deserved a man who could stay put, not a wanderer like him. He'd lied to himself for 30 years. Now his horse brought him down into the meadow, and James felt his throat tighten. The cabin looked smaller than he remembered, but solid. Someone had maintained it. The logs had been re-chinked in places, the roof repaired with new shakes. The corral he'd built still stood, though the posts had been replaced, and there were horses in that corral. 3 of them, good stock. They lifted their heads as he approached, ears forward with mild curiosity. James pulled his horse to a stop 50 yards from the cabin, his heart hammering against his ribs. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin grey column. Morning smoke from a fire just stoked to life. Someone was home. He sat there for a long moment, frozen between the urge to ride forward and the desire to turn around and disappear back into the mountains. This had been a mistake. Whatever he'd hoped to find here, closure perhaps, or forgiveness, it wasn't his to claim. He'd given up that right 3 decades ago, but then his eyes caught on the door. His door, the one he'd carved and fitted and marked with his initials. Time had weathered the wood to silver grey, but he could still see the careful work of his younger self. The door hung true, just as he'd made it. A man should be able to walk through a door he built with his own hands. James dismounted slowly, feeling his joints protest. He tied his horse to the corral fence and stood there, gathering his courage. The morning air smelled of pine and wood smoke and the clean scent of the creek. A magpie called from somewhere in the trees. The world felt suspended, waiting. He walked toward the cabin, his boots crunching on the gravel path. Someone had laid that gravel, kept the weeds from growing. Someone had swept the porch clean. Someone had hung a pot of wildflowers beside the door, blue columbine and Indian paintbrush. James reached the porch steps and paused. The boards looked new, replaced within the last few years. But when he set his foot on the first step, he felt it settle with the same slight give he remembered. The second step was silent, just as he'd planned it. The third creaked. He'd never fixed that. The door had a latch now instead of the leather string he'd used. A real iron latch, well made. He reached for it, then stopped. What was he doing? He couldn't just walk into someone's home. Even if he'd built it, even if his initials were still carved in the wood, it wasn't his anymore. He'd abandoned it. Abandoned everything. James stood on the porch, his hand hovering near the latch, and for the first time in 30 years, he didn't know what to do. Then he noticed the leather saddlebag hanging from a peg beside the door. A woman's bag, small and well-worn, and through the window he'd fitted with real glass, carried all the way from Fort Laramie, he could see into the main room. The interior was neat, cared for. His old table still stood in the center of the room, though someone had sanded it smooth and oiled the wood. A woman's shawl lay draped over one of the chairs, deep blue wool. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a small wooden horse, carved with skill and care. A child's toy, and beside the toy a stack of letters bound with string. James felt his chest constrict. He reached for the latch again, and this time his hand didn't hesitate. The door opened smoothly, swinging inward on hinges that barely whispered. The cabin smelled like cedar and bread and lamp oil. James stepped inside, removing his hat instinctively. The morning light slanted through the window, illuminating dust motes in the air. Everything was familiar and foreign at once. His walls, his floor, his fireplace, but filled with a life he'd never known. He moved to the table, his boots loud on the floorboards. The shawl was soft beneath his fingers, well made. Beside it lay a mending basket with a half-finished shirt. Women's work, domestic and patient. On the mantel he picked up the wooden horse. It fit in his palm perfectly, carved from pine, with a flowing mane and proud stance. The work was excellent, better than he could do. Someone had taken time with this, had cared about getting it right. Then he saw the letters. They were old, the paper yellowed with age. The string that bound them had faded from red to pale pink. James set down the horse and picked up the stack with trembling hands. The top letter was addressed in a woman's careful script. James Caldwell, General Delivery, Fort Bridger, Wyoming Territory. The postmark read, April 1845, 20 years ago. Below it, another letter with the same handwriting, same destination. Then another, and another. A dozen letters, all addressed to him, all from different years, spanning from 1845 to 1850. all marked, "Return to sender." James sank into the chair, the letters heavy in his hands. His vision blurred. He blinked hard and opened the first letter, the paper crackling softly. "My dearest James, I write to you hoping this letter finds you well. It has been 3 months since you left, and I have news that cannot wait. I'm with child, James, our child. I did not know when you departed, but I am certain now. I do not write this to call you back out of obligation, but because I believe you would want to know. Perhaps you are already on your way home. Perhaps this letter will reach you in time. I will wait for you. The cabin is ready. Our child will be born in winter. Yours always." Sarah James couldn't breathe. The words swam before his eyes. A child, their child. He'd had a child. His hands shook as he opened the second letter, dated 6 months later. "My dearest James, I have a daughter, Emma Sarah Caldwell. She was born 3 weeks ago in the deep snow, healthy and strong. She has your dark hair and my eyes. I am writing to every fort and trading post I know, hoping one of these letters reaches you. Please come home. Please meet your daughter. We are well. My brother helps when he can. I've learned to manage on my own, but oh, James, I miss you terribly. Sarah." The third letter was dated a year after that. Then 2 years. The tone shifted gradually from hope to sadness to resignation. Sarah had kept writing, kept trying, but none of the letters had found him. He'd been too far in the backcountry, too removed from civilization, moving from one isolated camp to another. The final letter was dated 1850. 5 years after the first, James, this is the last letter I will write. I do not know if you are alive or dead. I do not know if you simply chose not to return. Either way, I must accept that you are gone. Emma is 5 years old now. She asks about her father sometimes. I tell her you were a good man who loved the mountains. I do not tell her that you loved them more than us. I will raise her to be strong and kind. I will teach her everything I know. And if you ever do return, you will find the door unlocked and the cabin kept. I will not write again." Sarah James sat in the chair he'd made 33 years ago, in the cabin he'd built with his own hands, holding letters from a woman he'd loved and left. The weight of what he'd lost pressed down on him like a physical thing. He had a daughter, Emma. She was 30 years old now, a grown woman. A woman who'd lived her entire life without knowing her father. And Sarah, God, Sarah, she'd raised their child alone. She'd kept the cabin. She'd kept trying to reach him year after year until hope finally died. Where was Sarah now? Was she? James heard hoofbeats. He stood quickly, the letters falling from his lap to scatter on the floor. Through the window, he saw a rider approaching from the north. A woman on a grey mare, riding with easy confidence. She wore a split riding skirt and a leather vest, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. As she drew closer, James felt his heart stop. She had Sarah's eyes. Her face was different, stronger, more angular, but those eyes were creek water catching sunlight. Exactly as he remembered, the rider reined in her horse at the corral, swinging down from the saddle with practiced ease. She paused, looking at James's horse tied to her fence. Her hand went to the rifle in her saddle scabbard. James stood frozen in the center of the cabin, a trespasser in his own home, as his daughter came to find out who'd invaded her house. Emma approached the cabin with her rifle in hand, not pointed, but ready. James watched her through the window, his mouth dry. She moved like someone comfortable with danger, alert but not afraid. She climbed the porch steps without hesitation and pushed the door open wide. Their eyes met across the room. For a long moment neither spoke. Emma took in the scene, the scattered letters on the floor, the old man standing in the center of her home, the look of devastation on his weathered face. Her grip on the rifle tightened, then relaxed slightly. "Who are you?" Her voice was steady, deeper than he'd expected. Not harsh, but firm. James opened his mouth and found he had no words. "How did you introduce yourself to a daughter who didn't know you existed?" "I asked you a question." Emma stepped fully into the cabin, leaving the door open behind her. An escape route, James realized, in case she needed it. "My name is James Caldwell." His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. Emma's eyes narrowed. She looked at him more carefully now, studying his face. He watched her gaze travel from his grey beard to his weathered hands, to the letters scattered at his feet. Her expression shifted, confusion, then recognition, then something harder. "James Caldwell," she repeated slowly. "The man who built this cabin." "Yes, the man who left in 1835 and never came back." James nodded, unable to speak. Emma's jaw tightened. She leaned her rifle against the wall, but kept herself between James and the door. "My mother told me about you. She said you were tall, said you had dark hair and kind eyes." She paused. "Said you promised to come back." James started, then stopped. What could he possibly say? "She's dead." Emma's words cut through the air like a blade. 5 years ago, pneumonia. She held on through winter, but spring never came for her. James felt the room tilt. He reached for the back of the chair to steady himself. "Sarah." "That's right. Sarah Mills. She never married. Never took another man's name, though God knows plenty asked." Emma's voice held a bitter edge. "She said she was already spoken for, even if the man who spoke for her never bothered to show up." "I didn't know," James managed. "About you? About any of this? Didn't know or didn't care to find out?" Emma moved closer, her creek-water eyes searching his face. "She wrote you letters?" "Dozens of them. Sent them to every fort and trading post between here and the Pacific. They all came back. I was in the high country. Deep wilderness. I didn't." James gestured helplessly at the letters on the floor. "I never received them. Never knew she was trying to reach me." Emma knelt and gathered the letters carefully, her movements precise. She held them against her chest like something precious. She kept these, all of them, tied them up and put them on the mantel, where she could see them every day. She looked up at James. "She never stopped hoping you'd come back. I'm sorry." The words felt pathetically inadequate. "Sorry." Emma stood, setting the letters back on the mantel beside the wooden horse. 30 years late, but sorry. James flinched at the accuracy of her aim. "I was young and foolish. I convinced myself she'd be better off without me, that she'd find someone more dependable. She found herself," Emma said quietly. "She learned to trap and hunt. She learned to deliver calves and mend harness and shoot straight. She learned to read sign and track game. She survived because she had to." Emma turned to face him fully. "And she raised me to do the same." James looked at his daughter, really looked at her. She was strong, capable, self-sufficient. Everything Sarah must have been. "She did well," he said softly. I'm what?" Emma's voice held challenge. "You're remarkable." Emma's expression flickered, something vulnerable crossing her face before her defenses went back up. "I'm my mother's daughter. I don't know what I am to you." James nodded slowly. "That's fair. I have no right to claim anything." "No," Emma agreed. "You don't." She moved to the fireplace, stirring the coals absently. "Why are you here? After all this time, why now?" "I got old," James said simply. "The mountains got lonely. I started thinking about the choices I'd made, the things I'd left behind. I thought maybe I could see this place one more time before—" He shrugged. "I didn't expect anyone to be here. Where else would I be?" Emma asked. "This is my home. My mother built a life here after you left. She ran a way station for travelers, earned respect, made this cabin mean something." She gestured around the room. "Everything you see she did. The repairs, the improvements, the garden out back. You built the shell, but she made it a home." James absorbed this, feeling the weight of Sarah's strength and his own failure. "She was always better than me." "Yes," Emma said bluntly. "She was." They stood in uncomfortable silence. James noticed details now that he'd missed before. The bookshelf Sarah must have built, filled with volumes she'd collected over the years. The iron stove in the corner, much better than the open hearth he'd left. The braided rug beneath the table, made from scraps of fabric, each color telling a story. "There's something else you should see." Emma walked to the corner of the cabin, to the spot where James had built a small storage closet. She knelt and pried up one of the floorboards, reaching into the space beneath. When she straightened, she held a leather-bound book. "What is that?" James asked. "Her journal?" Emma held it out to him. "She started it the year I was born. Kept it until the year she died." James's hands trembled as he took the book. The leather was soft with age, the pages thick. He opened it carefully to the first entry, written in Sarah's careful hand. December 15th, 1835. Emma was born today at dawn. She is perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, lungs strong enough to wake the dead. I held her and wept, wishing James could see her, wishing he could know the miracle we made together. James closed his eyes against the surge of emotion. When he opened them, Emma was watching him with an unreadable expression. "You can read it if you want," she said quietly. "It's mostly about me growing up. But there are parts about you too. Things she remembered. Things she wished she could tell you. I don't deserve—" "No, you don't," Emma cut him off. "But maybe you need to know what your leaving cost. What you missed." She moved toward the door. "I'm going to tend my horses. When I come back, I want you to decide whether you're staying for a cup of coffee or riding out. Either way, I need to know." "Emma," James started. She paused in the doorway, her back to him. "That's another thing. I know my name because Mama told me. Told me you two had picked it out together before you left. Emma after your mother. Sarah after mine." She turned her head slightly. "She gave me both names, even though you weren't there to help choose." James felt tears burning his eyes. "I would have loved that." "Loved you. Would have doesn't mean much," Emma said. "But there's still time for will, if you're brave enough." She walked out, leaving James alone with the journal. He sank into the chair and opened the book again, turning pages slowly. Sarah's words painted a picture of a life he'd never known. Emma's first steps, her first words, the year they survived on dried venison and hope. The neighbors who helped, the traveling families Sarah sheltered, building her reputation as a woman of hospitality and strength. There were entries about James, too. Sarah wrote about their courtship with tenderness, remembering small moments he'd forgotten. She wrote about her anger as the years passed and he didn't return. She wrote about forgiveness, hard-won and genuine. One entry, dated 1850, stopped him cold. "I have decided to stop waiting. Not to stop loving, I will carry that until I die, but to stop letting his absence define my life. Emma needs a mother who is present, not one who is always looking toward the horizon. So I put away my hope of his return and focus on what I have. This cabin, this child, this life. It is enough. It has to be." James read that passage 3 times, feeling the knife of it cut deeper each time. Sarah had loved him until it nearly destroyed her, and then she'd chosen to live anyway. She'd chosen Emma, chosen strength, chosen to build something meaningful from the ruins of their broken promise. He turned more pages, watching Emma grow up through Sarah's eyes. She was smart, curious, stubborn. She learned everything Sarah could teach her, and then pushed to learn more. At 15, she'd tracked and killed a bear that had been threatening the livestock. At 20, she'd helped deliver a baby when a traveler's wife went into labor during a storm. At 25, she'd fought off 3 men who'd tried to steal their horses, wounding one badly enough that they never came back. Sarah had raised a warrior, a survivor, a woman of substance and courage. The last entry was dated just a week before Sarah died. "My strength is leaving me. I feel it draining away like water through my fingers." Emma tries to hide her fear, but I see it in her eyes. "She has been the light of my life, the reason I kept going when everything else failed. If James ever returns, and oh, some foolish part of me still hopes he might, I pray he sees what a gift she is. I pray he doesn't run again. Emma deserves a father who stays. If he can't be that man, I hope he has the decency to ride past without stopping. Better no father than one who leaves." James closed the journal carefully, his vision blurred. He sat for a long time with his head bowed, feeling the full weight of 30 years of absence. Sarah had asked for so little, just that he return, just that he stay, and he'd given her nothing. But Emma was here, living, breathing proof that Sarah had created something beautiful despite his failure. Emma, who had every right to hate him, who could have sent him away without a second thought. Emma, who had offered him coffee and a choice. James heard footsteps on the porch. He wiped his eyes quickly and stood, setting the journal carefully on the table. When Emma entered, she found him standing straight, his hat in his hands. "I'd like that coffee," James said quietly. If the offer still stands. Emma studied him for a moment, then nodded. It stands. She moved to the stove where a pot sat ready. 1 cup. Then we talk about what happens next. Fair enough. Emma poured 2 cups and handed one to James. They sat across from each other at the table. The journal between them like a bridge or a barrier. James couldn't tell which. I read some of it, James said. About you growing up. About your mother's strength. She was the strongest person I ever knew, Emma said simply. I can see that. And I can see where you got it from. James wrapped his hands around the warm cup. Emma, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I need you to understand I never knew. If I had known about you, about Sarah being pregnant, would you have come back? Emma asked, cutting to the heart of it. James opened his mouth to say yes, then stopped. He owed her honesty at least. I want to say yes. But I was a different man then. Selfish, restless. I don't know if I would have had the courage to stay, even knowing about you. Emma's expression softened slightly at his honesty. At least you're not lying to me. I won't lie to you, James promised. You deserve better than that. They drank their coffee in silence. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, filling the valley with light. James watched Emma's face, seeing Sarah in every line and angle, but seeing someone new, too. Someone forged by hardship into something unbreakable. I'd like to stay a few days, James said finally. Not in the cabin. I can camp in the barn or out by the creek. But I'd like to help with repairs, if you'll let me. And I'd like... He paused, searching for words. I'd like to know you, if you're willing. Emma set down her cup. Why? Because you're my daughter, James said. Because I already lost 30 years. Because maybe, if you'll give me the chance, I can be the father I should have been from the start. That's a lot of maybes, Emma observed. It's all I've got. Emma rose and walked to the window, looking out at the valley. James waited, hardly breathing. Finally, she turned back to him. 1 week, she said. You can stay 1 week. Sleep in the barn. Help with the work. We'll talk when the work is done. After that, she shrugged. We'll see. James felt relief flood through him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Emma said. And don't mistake this for forgiveness. I'm just curious, I guess. But the man my mother loved enough to wait 30 years for. I'll try to be worthy of that curiosity, James said. Emma almost smiled. Almost. The barn's out back. There's clean straw and a water pump. Supper's at sundown if you want to join me. I will, James said. Thank you, Emma. She nodded once, then turned back to her work. James collected his things and walked out to move his horse, carrying Sarah's journal with him like a sacred text. As he settled into the barn, spreading his bedroll in the clean straw, he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 decades. Hope. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there. Emma had given him a week. 7 days to prove he was more than the man who'd left. 7 days to show her he could stay. 7 days to try to earn back what he'd thrown away so carelessly all those years ago. James lay back on his bedroll and stared up at the barn rafters. Sarah's words echoing in his mind. Better no father than one who leaves. He wouldn't leave. Not this time. Whatever it took, whatever Emma needed from him, he would stay. He'd failed Sarah, but maybe, just maybe, he could find a way not to fail their daughter. Outside, the sun climbed toward noon, and in the cabin, Emma stood at the window watching the barn, her arms crossed. Her heart heavy with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. The first morning James woke before dawn, out of habit. 30 years of mountain living had trained his body to rise with the birds. He lay in the straw for a moment, disoriented by the enclosed space. The barn smelled of hay and horses and leather, domestic smells he'd almost forgotten existed. He rose quietly, not wanting to disturb Emma if she was still sleeping. But when he stepped out into the grey pre-dawn light, he saw smoke already rising from the cabin chimney. Emma was up, had probably been up for an hour already. James walked to the creek and washed his face in the cold water, then made his way to the corral. Emma's 3 horses stood dozing, barely acknowledging his presence. Good animals, well cared for. He checked the fence posts, finding several that had started to rot at the base. An easy fix. dig them out, replace them with fresh timber from the pine forest on the slope. He was carrying tools from the barn when Emma emerged from the cabin with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one without a word, then stood watching him work. "Fence posts are going," James said, feeling the need to explain. "Thought I'd replace them before they fail completely," Emma nodded. "Been meaning to get to that. Haven't had time." They drank their coffee in silence. The sun broke over the eastern ridge, flooding the valley with golden light. James remembered mornings like this, 33 years ago. The promise each day held. The satisfaction of honest work ahead. "I'll need to cut timber," he said. "Pine, probably. Let it season a bit in the sun before setting it. Take what you need." Emma finished her coffee and handed him the empty cup along with hers. "I've got work of my own today. Checking trap lines up north." James felt surprise. "You run trap lines?" "Mama taught me." Emma's tone carried pride. "How do you think we survived?" "Way station brings in some money, but not enough. Pelts help fill the gaps. What are you trapping?" "Beaver, mostly. Some marten and fox. Nothing like the old days," Mama said, "but enough." Emma headed toward the barn. "I'll be gone most of the day. Help yourself to what you need." James watched her saddle her grey mare with efficient movements, checking the cinch twice, settling her rifle in its scabbard. She swung up into the saddle and paused, looking down at him. "Don't go in the cabin unless there's an emergency," she said. "That's my space. I understand." Emma nodded and rode north, her horse moving at an easy lope. James stood watching until she disappeared into the tree line, then turned back to his work. He spent the morning cutting timber, selecting straight young pines, and felling them with careful aim. The work was familiar, satisfying. His muscles remembered the rhythm of it, the swing of the axe, the bite into wood, the smell of fresh sap. By midday, he had 6 good posts cut and stripped, laid out to dry in the sun. He ate a simple lunch of jerky and hardtack from his supplies, then turned his attention to digging out the rotted posts. The ground was harder than he expected, packed and settled by years of Wyoming weather. His back protested the work, reminding him he wasn't 28 anymore. But he kept at it, finding satisfaction in the honest ache of labor. As he worked, his mind drifted to Sarah. She would have done this work herself if Emma hadn't been here to help. Would have swung the axe and dug the holes and set the posts, because that's what survival demanded. The image of her, older, weathered, strong, haunted him. He wished he could have seen her one more time, wished he could have told her he was sorry, that he'd been a fool. The sun was starting to descend when Emma returned. James heard her horse before he saw her, and he straightened from his work, wiping sweat from his forehead. She rode into the yard with 3 beaver pelts tied to her saddle, her expression satisfied. "Good day?" James asked. "Good enough." Emma dismounted and began untying the pelts. "You've been busy. Still got 2 more posts to set, but I'll finish tomorrow." James nodded toward the pelts. "Those are fine specimens." Emma glanced at him. "You know beaver?" "I'd trapped them for 30 years. James moved closer, examining the pelts without touching. "Those are prime. Winter coat just coming in. You'll get good money for those." Something shifted in Emma's expression, not quite approval, but acknowledgement. "Mama always said patience was the key to good trapping. Set your traps where the beaver want to go, not where you want them to be." She was right. James smiled slightly. "That's the first lesson any good trapper learns. Most never do." Emma carried the pelts into the barn to stretch and dry them. James followed, watching as she worked with practiced efficiency. She'd set up a good operation, stretching frames, scraping tools, salt barrels. Everything organized and maintained. "You do good work," James said quietly. Emma didn't look up. "I learned from the best." They fell silent again, but it felt less tense than before. More like 2 people who didn't quite know each other yet, but were starting to find common ground. That evening, Emma invited him in for supper. The cabin felt warm and welcoming, lamplight casting soft shadows on the walls. She'd made a simple stew, venison and vegetables from her garden, and fresh biscuits. They ate at the table James had made, using dishes Sarah must have collected over the years. "This is good," James said. "Thank you," Emma nodded. "Mama always said meals taste better when they're shared." James set down his spoon. "Will you tell me about her?" about what she was like? Emma looked up, studying his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she began to speak. She was kind, Emma said. That's what I remember most. People would come through. Travelers, families heading west, traders, and she'd feed them, give them a place to sleep. She never turned anyone away, even when we didn't have much ourselves. James listened, picturing Sarah opening their cabin to strangers, offering hospitality with the same generosity she'd once shown him. She taught me to read and write, Emma continued. Had maybe a dozen books, but we read them over and over. She said education was the only thing nobody could take from you. Emma paused. She was strong too, had to be. There were times, especially that first winter after I was born, when we barely made it. But she never gave up, never stopped fighting. She sounds remarkable. She was. Emma's voice softened. She used to sing while she worked. Old songs mostly, hymns and ballads. I can still hear her voice sometimes, when the wind's right. James felt his throat tighten. I wish I could have heard that. So do I, Emma said quietly. Then more firmly, tell me about your life. The 30 years you were gone. It was James's turn to gather his thoughts. It was lonely, he admitted. I didn't realize how lonely until near the end. I convinced myself I was happy, just me and the mountains, answering to no one. But that's not happiness. That's just avoiding pain. What made you leave? Emma asked. Really leave, I mean. Not the excuses you told yourself, but the real reason. James considered lying, then remembered his promise. No lies. I was afraid, he said. Afraid of being trapped. Afraid of failing at being a husband and father. My own father. He wasn't a good man. Drunk, angry, quick with his fists. I was terrified I'd turn out like him, did you? Emma's gaze was direct, no. But I failed in a different way. I ran instead of fighting my fear. Left Sarah to face everything alone. James met her eyes. Running doesn't make you free. It just makes you alone. Emma absorbed this. Mama used to say fear was like a wolf. Ignore it, and it'll chase you forever. Face it and you might get bit, but at least you'll know what you're dealing with. James smiled despite himself. She was wise. She had to be. Emma stood and began clearing dishes. She didn't have the luxury of running away. The words stung, but James didn't flinch from them. They were true. He helped her clean up, learning where things went, falling into an easy rhythm. When the work was done, they sat on the porch as darkness fell over the valley. The stars came out one by one, bright and clear in the mountain air. I used to sit here with Mama, Emma said quietly. She'd tell me stories about when she was young, about the dances in town, the friends she had, the dreams she carried. She paused. She told me about you too. Said you were the first man who'd ever made her feel truly seen. James closed his eyes against the pain. I saw her. I just didn't have the courage to stay and keep seeing her. Do you now? Emma asked. Have the courage, I mean? I'm here, aren't I? For now, Emma said. But staying 1 week isn't the same as staying a lifetime. No, James agreed. It's not. They sat in silence, listening to the night sounds. Crickets, a distant owl, the soft movement of horses in the corral. James thought about Sarah sitting in this same spot, looking out at this same valley, waiting for someone who never came. I found something today, Emma said suddenly. While I was checking traps. She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. It was in Mama's things. I'd never seen it before. She handed him the box. It was cedar, smooth from handling, with a simple latch. James opened it carefully. Inside was a ring. Not an expensive ring, just a simple band of silver, slightly tarnished with age. But James recognized it immediately. He'd bought it from a tinker in Fort Laramie, spent everything he had on it. He'd planned to give it to Sarah when he returned from that one last trapping season. She kept it, Emma said softly. All those years. Never wore it, but never got rid of it either. James held the ring carefully, remembering the weight of his plans, his promises, his failures. I meant to give this to her, he said. Meant to marry her proper, with a ring and ceremony and everything she deserved. But you didn't, no. I left it in my pack when I rode out. Told myself I'd give it to her when I got back. James turned the ring slowly between his fingers. One more broken promise. Emma took the box back but left the ring in James's palm. Maybe you should keep it. A reminder. Of what? Of the man you were. And the man you're trying to become. Emma stood. I'm going to bed. You know where the barn is? James nodded, pocketing the ring carefully. Emma, thank you. For today. For giving me this chance. She paused in the doorway. Don't thank me yet. We still have 6 days to go. After she went inside, James sat alone on the porch for a long time, the ring heavy in his pocket. He thought about Sarah wearing it in her mind, if not on her finger. Thought about the life they should have had, the family they should have been. Finally, he rose and made his way to the barn. As he settled into his bedroll, he pulled out the ring and held it up to the moonlight streaming through the cracks in the walls. The silver gleamed softly, still beautiful after all these years. He closed his fist around it and made a silent promise to the woman who'd kept it for him. I'll do better, Sarah. I'll be the father Emma deserves. I won't run anymore. In the cabin, Emma stood at the window watching the barn. She held her mother's journal open to a page near the end, reading by lamplight. If James ever comes back, I hope Emma has the wisdom to see past my hurt to the good man I once knew. I hope she gives him a chance. Even if I couldn't, love shouldn't die just because I did. Maybe it can live on in them if they're brave enough. Emma closed the journal slowly. I'm trying, Mama, she whispered. I'm trying to be brave enough. She blew out the lamp and went to bed. But sleep was a long time coming. Outside, the valley settled into night, and two people, father and daughter, strangers and family, lay awake under the same stars, wondering if redemption was possible and what it might cost to find out. 3 days passed in a rhythm of work and careful conversation. James finished the fence posts and moved on to other repairs, reshinging part of the roof, fixing a loose board in the porch, clearing brush from around the cabin to reduce fire risk. Emma watched his progress with quiet approval, and gradually the walls between them began to lower. On the 4th morning, Emma found James examining the attic ladder. Something wrong? She asked. Rungs are loose, James said. Mind if I go up and check the structure? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Just be careful. Some of the boards up there might not hold. James climbed carefully, testing each rung. The attic was dim and dusty, filled with the accumulated treasures and necessities of 30 years. He moved slowly, letting his eyes adjust, mindful of where he stepped. That's when he saw it. In the corner, covered with an old blanket, sat something wooden. James moved closer and pulled back the cloth, his breath catching. It was a cradle, hand-carved from pine, with smooth rockers and high sides. The work was beautiful, careful and loving, every edge sanded smooth, every joint fitted perfectly. On the headboard, carved in delicate letters, was a name, Emma Sarah Caldwell. James knelt beside the cradle, running his fingers over the wood. He could see Sarah's work in every curve and line. She'd made this while pregnant, preparing a place for their daughter to sleep. Made it alone, through the long winter nights, singing to the child growing inside her. I see you found it, James startled. Emma had climbed up without him hearing, standing now at the top of the ladder. She made this. James's voice was hoarse. Emma nodded, moving to kneel beside him. She started it the day after you left. Worked on it all through her pregnancy. Said every baby deserved a proper cradle. James traced the carved letters of Emma's name. It's beautiful. She told me she'd sing to me while she carved. Old lullabies her mother sang to her. Emma touched the smooth wood. This was the first thing I knew of her love. Before I could see or speak, I was rocked in something she'd made with her own hands. She must have been so scared, James said quietly. Pregnant, alone, me gone. She was terrified. Emma's voice was soft. I found her journal entries from that time. She wrote about the fear of childbirth, of winter, of raising a child without help. But she wrote about hope too. About how every kick I gave her reminded her she wasn't really alone. That she was building a family, even if it was just the two of us. James felt tears on his face and didn't wipe them away. I should have been here. Yes, Emma agreed simply. You should have. They sat in silence, both touching the cradle Sarah had made. Outside, morning birds sang and the sun climbed higher. Did she rock you in this? James asked. Every night until I was too big. Emma smiled slightly. She said I was a fussy baby. Only way to get me to sleep was rocking and singing. She'd spend hours up here, walking the floor with me, humming until I finally gave in. James imagined it, Sarah tired and alone, pacing the attic floor with their daughter in her arms, giving everything she had to keep their child safe and loved. The image broke something inside him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I left her." "Left you both?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentler than he'd heard it. "Mama used to say sorry was like planting a seed. It's necessary, but it's not enough. You have to water it with action, tend it with time, before it grows into something real." James looked at her. "I don't know if I have enough time to make this right." "Maybe not," Emma said. "But you can try. That's more than you did before." She stood and moved back toward the ladder. "Bring it down if you want. Might as well have it where it can be seen instead of hidden up here." After she descended, James sat alone with the cradle for a few more minutes. He examined every detail. The way Sarah had carved small flowers into the headboard, the smooth perfection of the rockers, the sturdy joints that had held strong through 30 years. This was love made visible. This was what he'd walked away from. He carried the cradle down carefully, one rung at a time, and set it in the corner of the main room near the fireplace. Emma watched from the kitchen area but said nothing. That afternoon, they worked together for the first time. A traveling family had sent word ahead that they'd be arriving by evening. A couple with 3 children, heading west to Oregon Territory. Emma explained that the way station was, how she and Sarah had survived all these years. $1 a night for a family, 50 cents for a single traveler, meals included. "We'll need to prepare the bunkhouse," Emma said. "Fresh straw, water, firewood. And I'll need to cook enough for 7. I can help," James offered. Emma studied him, then nodded. "All right. Start with the bunkhouse. It's the small building behind the barn." James found the bunkhouse well-maintained, but dusty from disuse. He swept it out, laid fresh straw on the sleeping platforms, filled the water barrel, and stacked firewood by the small stove. As he worked, he thought about Sarah doing this work year after year, welcoming strangers, offering hospitality and safety. She'd built more than just a way station. She'd built a refuge. When he returned to the cabin, Emma was preparing food. James watched her work, efficient, economical, stretching supplies to feed many from little. Another skill Sarah had taught her. "Can I help?" James asked. "Peel these." Emma handed him a basket of potatoes and a knife. They worked side by side, falling into an easy rhythm. James peeled while Emma chopped vegetables and seasoned a large pot of stew. The domesticity of it struck him. This was what life could have been. Simple tasks shared, comfortable silence between partners. "You do this often?" James asked. "Have travelers through?" "Few times a month, more in summer." Emma stirred the pot. "Mama built a good reputation. People knew they'd be safe here, fed well, treated fairly. Word spreads on the frontier. She was building a legacy. She was building a life," Emma corrected. "A good one. Honest work, honest dealings." She was proud of what she'd made here. The family arrived just before sunset. Tom and Mary Henderson, with their children aged 7, 5, and 3. They were dusty and tired from travel, their wagon packed tight with everything they owned. James watched Emma greet them with warm efficiency, showing them to the bunkhouse, explaining the facilities. The Hendersons joined them for supper, crowding around the table James had made. The children were shy at first, but Emma had a way with them, patient and kind, slipping the youngest child an extra biscuit when she thought no one was looking. "You've got a fine operation here," Tom Henderson said, his accent marking him as from back east somewhere. "Clean, safe, good food. Better than most places we've stayed." "My mother established it," Emma said. "I just try to maintain her standards." "She taught you well," Mary Henderson said, bouncing the youngest on her knee. It's rare to find such hospitality on the trail. After the meal, the Hendersons retreated to the bunkhouse to settle their children for sleep. James helped Emma clean up, washing dishes while she stored the leftovers. "You were good with them," James observed. "The children especially," Emma shrugged. "Mama always said children and animals could sense when someone genuinely cared. You can't fake kindness with them." Your mother was right about a lot of things. She was right about everything, Emma said quietly. Then, surprising him, she added, except maybe one thing. What's that? Emma dried her hands slowly. She used to say some people weren't meant to settle down, that the frontier called to certain souls, and they had to answer. She said maybe you were one of those people, and she shouldn't have tried to change you. James set down the dish he was washing. That's generous of her. Too generous. Is it true, though? Emma asked. Are you one of those people? James considered the question carefully. I thought I was. For 30 years, I convinced myself the mountains were where I belonged. But the truth is, I was running, using the wilderness as an excuse not to face my own fears. He looked at Emma directly. Your mother didn't try to change me. She just offered me something real, and I was too much of a coward to accept it. Emma nodded slowly, processing this. And now I'm old enough to know the difference between freedom and loneliness, between choosing a path and running from one. James paused. The mountains are beautiful, Emma, but they're cold comfort when you're dying alone. They finished the dishes in silence. When they stepped out onto the porch, the valley was dark except for lamplight from the bunkhouse and a sky full of stars. Tell me something about her I don't know, Emma said suddenly. Something from when you two were together. James thought back across the decades. She laughed at everything. Not nervous laughter, but genuine joy. I'd never met anyone who found so much delight in ordinary things. Once we were walking by the creek, and a frog jumped right into her path. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. Emma smiled. She kept that. Even when things were hard, she'd find something to laugh about. Said laughter was cheaper than medicine and twice as effective. She used to sing while she cooked, James continued. Nothing fancy, just old ballads. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it was real, honest. He paused. I can still hear it sometimes when I let myself remember. What was her favorite song? Barbara Allen. She sang it all the time. Said it reminded her that love was worth fighting for, even when it hurt. Emma's expression shifted, recognition, then something deeper. She sang that to me. Every night when I was small, I never knew why she chose that song. Because she believed in love, James said quietly. Even after I left, even after I broke her heart, she still believed it was real and worth having. They stood together, father and daughter, separated by 30 years of absence, but connected by the woman who had loved them both. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and sage. I miss her, Emma said softly. Every day I miss her. So do I, James replied. Even though I have no right to. Emma turned to look at him. You know what the hardest part is? Watching you grieve for her makes me angry. Because where was that grief 30 years ago? Where was it when she needed you? James accepted the accusation without flinching. It was buried, hidden under excuses and cowardice. But it was always there, Emma. I just didn't let myself feel it until it was too late. That's not good enough. No, James agreed. It's not. Emma wrapped her arms around herself against the night chill. My mother deserved better than grief that came too late. She deserved a man who stayed, who built a life with her instead of running away from it. Yes, she did. So what are you doing here, James? Really? Emma's voice carried frustration and pain. Are you here because you actually care, or because you finally got lonely enough to remember what you threw away? The question cut deep because it was fair. James took a long breath before answering. Both, maybe. I won't lie and say it's all noble. I got old and scared and lonely, and I came back hoping to find something I'd lost. But Emma, he turned to face her fully. Meeting you, learning about your mother, seeing what she built, it's shown me what I really lost. Not just a woman and a child, but a purpose, a meaning. Sarah created something beautiful here, and you've continued it. That's a legacy worth more than anything I did in 30 years of wandering. Pretty words, Emma said, but her tone was less sharp. Maybe, but they're true. James gestured toward the cabin, the valley, everything Sarah had built. I can't change the past. Can't give your mother back the 30 years I stole from her. But I can honor what she created. I can try to be the father she wanted me to be, even if I'm 30 years late. Emma was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, she left me a letter. To give you if you ever came back? James felt his heart skip. She did? It's sealed. I haven't read it. Emma looked at him steadily. I've been trying to decide whether to give it to you or burn it. What did you decide? I don't know yet. Emma moved toward the cabin door. Maybe in a few more days. We'll see. She went inside, leaving James alone on the porch. He sat down on the steps, looking up at the stars, thinking about Sarah writing him one final letter. What would she say? Forgiveness or condemnation? Hope or goodbye? He didn't know if he was ready to find out, but he would be. He owed Sarah that much, to face whatever truth she'd left for him, however much it might hurt. In the bunkhouse, the Henderson children slept peacefully, safe and warm. In the cabin, Emma prepared for bed, her mother's sealed letter hidden in the wooden box with the wedding ring. And in the barn, James lay awake, wrestling with ghosts and possibilities. With the past he couldn't change, and the future he might not deserve. The valley held them all, the living and the memory of the dead, under the vast Wyoming sky, where tomorrow would bring another chance to prove that redemption wasn't just a word, but something you could build with time and truth and steady hands. On the 5th morning, Emma woke James before dawn. "Get dressed," she said through the barn door. "We've got work to do." James pulled on his boots and found her waiting by the corral, with both horses saddled. "Where are we going?" "Checking the north trap line. It's a 2-person job, and you said you know trapping." She handed him the reins to her spare horse. "Time to prove it." They rode north through the gray pre-dawn light, following a trail only Emma could see. James watched how she moved through the landscape, reading sign, noting changes, always aware of her surroundings. Sarah had taught her well. The first trap was empty, sprung by something too light to hold. Emma reset it with practiced efficiency. The second held a beaver, drowned and ready for skinning. James watched Emma work, seeing the respect she showed the animal even in death, wasting nothing, honoring the life taken. "Your mother taught you this?" James asked. "She taught me everything." Emma secured the pelt to her saddle. "Trapping, tracking, reading weather, reading people." She said survival wasn't about being strong. It was about being smart and staying humble. They continued up the line. At the 4th trap, they found something troubling. The trap had been disturbed, deliberately sprung and left. Emma knelt, examining the ground. "Someone's been here," she said quietly. "Boot prints, heading west." She looked up at James. "This is the 3rd trap this week someone's messed with. Competition?" James suggested. "Maybe. Or something worse?" Emma stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "There's been talk in town. Railroad surveyors in the area, looking at routes through the valley. Some folks think they're trying to push people out, make them give up their claims." James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "They can't just take people's land. They can if nobody stops them." Emma's jaw set. "Mama fought off claim jumpers twice. Said this land was ours by right of occupation and improvement. But now with just me," she shrugged. "I'm not sure how long I can hold it." "How much land is yours?" "The original 160 acres Mama claimed in your name, plus another 80 she added through homestead rights." Emma gestured at the surrounding valley. "It's not huge, but it's good land. Water, timber, grazing. The kind of land a railroad might want." James looked at the valley with new eyes. This wasn't just Emma's home. It was Sarah's legacy, built acre by acre through decades of work. "We should head back," he said. "Figure out what to do about this." But Emma shook her head. "We finish the line first. That's what Mama always did. Finish the work at hand before worrying about tomorrow." They checked the remaining traps, finding 2 more beaver and 1 marten. Emma worked with quiet concentration, and James found himself falling into old rhythms, using skills he hadn't needed in years. By the time they headed back, the sun was high, and James felt the ache of good work in his muscles. "You're not bad at this," Emma admitted as they rode. "For someone who's been out of practice. Some things you don't forget." James paused. "Emma, about the land. If someone's trying to push you out, you're going to need help. I can take care of myself. I know you can. But that doesn't mean you should have to." James guided his horse closer. "Your mother built something here. You've continued it. That's worth protecting." Emma glanced at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm still here. My week isn't up yet, and even after it is—" James hesitated. "I'd like to stay longer." If you'll have me. Emma rode in silence for a long moment. Why? So you can play at being a father for a while, then leave when it gets hard? The words stung, but James kept his voice steady. I deserve that. But no, I want to stay because this is where I should have been all along. Because you're my daughter and this was Sarah's home. Because maybe I can finally do something right. Maybe isn't good enough. Then I'll make it certain, James said firmly. I'm not leaving, Emma, not unless you tell me to go. Emma studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. All right, we'll see. Back at the cabin they found a rider waiting, an older woman on a sturdy pinto. She waved as they approached, her weathered face breaking into a smile. Emma Caldwell. Been too long, girl, Mrs. Patterson. Emma dismounted quickly, embracing the woman. What brings you out this way? It came to warn you. The woman's smile faded. Railroad's making moves. They've got surveyors all through the valley, and they're telling folks they need to sell or move. Some are taking the money and leaving. Emma's expression darkened. They can't force us out, maybe not legally, but they've got ways. Mrs. Patterson glanced at James. Who's this? This is... Emma hesitated. This is James Caldwell. My father. Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. James Caldwell. But I thought Sarah said you were gone, James finished. I was, for too long. But I'm back now. The older woman studied him with sharp eyes. Sarah was my friend. Good woman. Didn't deserve to be left alone. No, ma'am, she didn't. But she's gone now, and Emma's here. Mrs. Patterson turned back to Emma. Point is, the railroad's pushing hard. They're claiming some of the old claims aren't valid, trying to force sales. You need to make sure your papers are in order. Emma nodded. Mama kept everything. Deed, homestead papers, all of it. Good, because they're going to look for any excuse. Mrs. Patterson mounted her horse. You watch yourself, Emma, and you... She pointed at James. If you're really back, you better be here to help, not cause more trouble. Yes, ma'am, James said quietly. After Mrs. Patterson rode off, Emma and James stood in the yard, the weight of this new threat settling over them. We need to see those papers, James said. Make sure everything's documented properly. Emma led him into the cabin and pulled out a wooden box from beneath her bed. Inside were carefully preserved documents, the original land claim, dated 1835 and signed by James Caldwell. Homestead papers from 1850, filed by Sarah Mills, tax receipts, proof of improvements, letters from neighbors attesting to continuous occupation. James examined each document carefully. These look solid. The original claim is in my name, but I abandoned it. The homestead papers are in Sarah's name, but... He paused, seeing something. These list her as Sarah Mills Caldwell, Emma nodded. She never legally married you, but she took your name anyway. Said it was right since she was raising your child on your land. James felt the weight of that choice. Sarah claiming his name, even when he'd abandoned her. Maintaining his claim, even when he'd walked away. She was protecting the land, and protecting you, but is it legal? Emma asked. If they challenge it, I don't know, James admitted. The original claim is mine, but I've been gone 30 years. They could argue abandonment. The homestead papers are in Sarah's name, but she used my name without legal right. It's complicated, so what do we do? James looked at his daughter, strong, capable, worried for the first time since he'd met her. We go to town tomorrow. Talk to someone who knows land law. Make sure we understand what we're dealing with. That evening, they prepared for the trip in tense silence. Emma packed the documents carefully, while James checked the horses and gear. When darkness fell, they sat on the porch, neither quite ready to go inside. Tell me more about her, Emma said suddenly. About when you were together. I've heard Mama's version my whole life. I want to hear yours. James leaned back, searching his memory. She was different from anyone I'd known. Most women on the frontier were worn down by it, made hard by survival. But Sarah, she stayed soft where it mattered, kind. She'd stop to help an injured bird or talk to a child. But she was tough too. Once a drunk trader tried to cheat me on pelts, and Sarah called him out right there in front of everyone. Made him recalculate fair price, or she'd make sure everyone knew he was crooked. Emma smiled. That sounds like her. She was brave, James continued. Really brave, not just the absence of fear. When we first talked about building here, about claiming this land, she didn't hesitate. Just said, if we're going to do it, let's do it right. She had vision, could see what this place could become. She used to tell me about her dreams for this place, Emma said quietly. A real way station with multiple buildings, an orchard, maybe even a school someday, for families settling nearby. She paused. She only got part of it done, but what she did do was remarkable, James said. Emma, your mother turned this cabin into a refuge. She built a reputation, a business, a life. That's more than most people accomplish with twice the help. She did it without you. Yes, James acknowledged. And she shouldn't have had to. But the fact that she did, the fact that she succeeded despite my failure, that says everything about who she was. Emma was quiet for a moment, then reached into her pocket. I've decided, she said, pulling out an envelope. You should read this. It was the letter. The one Sarah had left for him. James took it with trembling hands. Are you sure? No, but Mama wanted you to have it, so Emma stood. I'll be inside. Read it out here where she used to sit. After Emma went in, James sat alone with the letter. The envelope was yellowed with age, sealed with wax that had cracked but held. His name was written across the front, in Sarah's careful hand. For James, if he returns. He broke the seal carefully and unfolded the pages inside. Sarah's handwriting filled 2 sheets, and he could almost hear her voice as he read. My dearest James, if you are reading this, then you have come home. I hope it is not too late, though I suspect by the time you receive this letter, I will be long gone from this world. I have tried many times to write this letter, and each time I find myself uncertain what to say. Should I tell you I'm angry? I am. Should I tell you I never stopped loving you? I haven't. Should I tell you that your daughter is the finest person I have ever known? She is. The truth is all of these things and none of them. The truth is I made peace with your absence a long time ago. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to for Emma's sake. A child needs a present parent, not one who is always looking toward the horizon, waiting for someone who will never come. But I never forgot you. James, never stopped wondering if you were alive, if you were happy, if you ever thought of us. I told myself it didn't matter, that we were fine without you. And we were fine. We survived and even thrived. But there was always a space where you should have been. An empty chair at the table, a missing voice in our conversations. I do not write this to make you feel guilty, though I suspect you will. I write it because you should know what your leaving cost. Not in money or comfort, but in the small moments that make a life. Emma's first steps, her first words. The night she was sick with fever, and I thought I might lose her. The day she learned to ride. The afternoon she asked why her papa didn't love us enough to stay. I told her you did love us. I told her sometimes people have to choose between different kinds of love. And the mountains called to you in a way we couldn't. I told her it didn't mean you loved us less. Just that you loved differently. I do not know if I was lying to her or to myself, but here is what I do know. Emma is strong and good and true. She has your restless spirit but my steady heart. She will test you because she needs to know if you are real or just another ghost. Be real for her, James. If you cannot be anything else, be honest. She deserves that much, and if you have the courage, if you have truly changed, then stay. Not for me, because I am gone. Not even for Emma, though she needs you more than she will admit. Stay, because it is the right thing to do. Stay, because this land, this home, this life we built, it deserves someone to carry it forward. I have left the door unlocked for you. I've kept your claim alive in my name. I have raised our daughter to be forgiving, even when she has every right to be hard. Do not waste these gifts. I loved you, James Caldwell. Loved you through the leaving and the absence and the long, lonely years. I hope, wherever you have been, that you found what you were looking for. But if you didn't, if you came home empty-handed and seeking forgiveness, know that I forgave you long ago. The question is whether you can forgive yourself. Take care of Emma. Love her as she deserves. And when the mountains call to you again, because they will, remember that true strength isn't in answering every call, but in knowing which ones matter most. Yours always. Sarah James read the letter twice, tears running unchecked down his weathered face. Sarah's words were a gift he didn't deserve. Forgiveness offered freely, love given without condition, hope extended beyond death. She had seen him clearly, understood his weaknesses, and still believed he could be better. The question is whether you can forgive yourself. Could he? Could he look at the life he'd lived, the choices he'd made, the woman he'd left and the child he'd never known, and find a way through the guilt to something resembling peace? He didn't know, but Sarah had given him a path. Be real, be honest, stay. Simple instructions that would take everything he had to follow. James folded the letter carefully and held it against his chest. "I'll try," he whispered to the darkness, to Sarah's ghost, to the valley that had witnessed her struggle and his absence. "I'll try to be the man you believed I could be." Inside the cabin, Emma sat at the table with her mother's journal open before her. She'd read Sarah's final entries so many times she had them memorized. But tonight, with her father outside reading Sarah's last words to him, she turned to a page she usually skipped, one that hurt too much to revisit. "Emma asked me today why her papa left. She's 8 now, old enough to understand absence, young enough to still believe in magic and happy endings. I told her what I always tell her, that he loved the mountains, that he wasn't ready to settle, that it wasn't about us. But she looked at me with those creek water eyes, his eyes, and said, 'Didn't he love us more than mountains?' I had no answer. Because the truth is, I don't know. Maybe he did and left anyway. Maybe he didn't, and I was a fool for waiting. Either way, my daughter deserves better than maybe. So I told her this: your papa is on a journey. And when people go on journeys, sometimes they lose their way home. But that doesn't mean home stops being there. We're still here, Emma. We're still his home, even if he never finds his way back to us." She thought about that, then asked, "What if he does come back?" "Then we'll be here waiting," I said. "Will you forgive him?" Such a simple question from a child's mouth. Will I forgive him? Can I? I don't know. But I hope I can teach Emma to forgive, even when I'm not sure I can do it myself. Emma closed the journal slowly. Her mother had taught her forgiveness without ever fully forgiving herself for hoping, had taught her strength while carrying the weight of abandonment, had taught her love while nursing a broken heart. And now James was here 30 years late, carrying his own weight of regret and sorrow. Emma didn't know if she could forgive him, didn't know if she even wanted to. But her mother had left the door unlocked, had kept the faith, had believed in the possibility of redemption. Maybe Emma could believe in it too, just maybe. 3 days after the fire, a rider arrived at dawn. James was already up, working on clearing the bunkhouse ruins, when he saw the man approaching, older, heavy-set, wearing a marshal's badge. James Caldwell. The man called. "That's right." James set down his shovel and waited. The marshal dismounted, his expression grave. "Name's Ben Cooper, town marshal. Need to talk to you and Miss Emma about the fire." Emma emerged from the cabin, rifle in hand, but lowered. "Marshal Cooper, took you long enough to come investigate?" "Been busy," Cooper said. "Railroad's keeping me running. But I'm here now." He looked at the ruins. "What happened?" "Someone burned our bunkhouse," Emma said flatly. 3 nights ago. Found a broken kerosene lamp at the door. It was deliberate." Cooper walked around the site, examining the evidence without touching anything. "You have any enemies, Miss Emma? Anyone who'd want to hurt you?" "The railroad wants our land," James said. "We were in town that day, talked to Timothy Walsh about protecting our claim. That evening, this happened." "That's a serious accusation," Cooper said carefully. "You got proof?" "Common sense," Emma replied. "We go to town, establish we're not selling, come home to find our building burned. What would you call it?" Cooper sighed heavily. "I'd call it circumstantial. Look, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I can't arrest anyone based on timing and suspicion. I need evidence." "We found the lamp," James said, "which proves someone used a lamp to start a fire. Doesn't prove who." Cooper pulled out a notebook. "I'll file a report. But unless you can give me names, witnesses, or physical evidence connecting someone specific to this fire, there's not much I can do." "How convenient," Emma said bitterly. Cooper's expression hardened. "Miss Emma, I knew your mother, respected her, but I'm the law here and I have to follow it. You want justice, you need proof. You want revenge, you're on your own, and I'll have to arrest you for whatever you do." Before Emma could respond, they heard horses, multiple riders, approaching fast. James grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the cabin wall, and Emma raised hers. Cooper's hand went to his pistol. 6 riders came into the yard, all armed, all wearing the hard looks of men used to violence. At their head rode Clayton Webb, looking relaxed and confident. "Morning, Marshal," Webb said pleasantly. "Caldwell." "Miss Emma heard about your fire. Terrible tragedy. What do you want, Webb?" James asked. Webb dismounted slowly, his men staying in their saddles. "I'm here on behalf of the Union Pacific Railroad to make you a generous offer. $10,000 for your property. That's well above market value considering the current difficulties." "Not interested," Emma said immediately. "Don't be hasty," Webb continued. "Think about it. $10,000. You could buy land anywhere, start fresh. No more," he gestured at the ruins, "unfortunate accidents." "That sounds like a threat," Cooper observed. "Just an observation, Marshal." Webb's smile never wavered. "Accidents happen on remote properties. Fires, injuries. Would be a shame if Miss Emma got hurt because she was too stubborn to accept a fair offer." James stepped forward, his rifle held casually but ready. "We're not selling. Now get off our land." Webb's smile finally faded. "You should think carefully, James. You've been gone a long time. Things have changed. The frontier's not what it was. Progress is coming, and people who stand in its way get crushed. Marshal Cooper's right here," James said. "You threatening us in front of the law?" "No threat," Webb said smoothly. "Just stating facts. The railroad needs this land for their route. They'll get it eventually, through purchase or other means. I'm trying to save you the trouble of the other means." "Noted," Emma said coldly. "Now leave." Webb remounted his horse, his men closing ranks around him. "You've got 3 days to reconsider. After that, the offer drops to 5,000. "After a week," he shrugged. "Well, accidents get more common the longer people hold out." After Webb and his men rode off, Cooper turned to James and Emma. "That was close to a threat, but not quite over the line. If anything happens, anything at all, you send for me immediately." "Like you'll do something," Emma muttered. "I will if I can," Cooper said firmly. "But I need evidence. Real evidence." He mounted his horse. "Be careful, both of you. Webb's dangerous, and the railroad doesn't like hearing no." After Cooper left, James and Emma stood in the yard, both feeling the weight of what had just happened. 3 days, Emma said. "They're giving us 3 days before they escalate." "We need help," James said. "Walsh, maybe some of the neighbors." "Walsh is a lawyer, not a fighter." "And the neighbors have their own problems." Emma set her jaw. "No, we handle this ourselves. Emma, we can and we will." She turned to face him. "You want to prove you're staying? This is how we fight for this land together, or we lose it. Those are the only choices." James nodded slowly. "Then we fight. But smart, not reckless. We fortify, we prepare, and we don't give them any excuse to claim we started trouble." They spent the rest of that day and the next 2 preparing. James reinforced the cabin doors and shutters. Emma laid in extra ammunition and supplies. They took turns on watch, sleeping in shifts, always alert. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Timothy Walsh arrived with unexpected news. "I've been digging into the land records," Walsh said, spreading papers on the table. "And I found something strange." "Very strange. What?" Emma asked. Walsh pulled out an old document. "This is a death certificate for James Caldwell, filed in 1847. Says he died in the mountains. Body never recovered." James felt ice in his stomach. "That's not possible." "I'm right here." "Exactly." Walsh tapped the document. "Someone filed a false death certificate." "And look at the witness signature." James leaned closer, then felt his blood run cold. "Clayton Webb. Webb declared you dead," Walsh said quietly. 8 years after you left. He filed papers claiming to have been with you when you died, witnessed your burial. Based on this certificate, your land claim was declared abandoned and opened for new filing. But Mama claimed it, Emma protested. She maintained it. Under your father's name, yes. But legally, if James was dead, she had no right to file in his name. Her claim could be considered fraudulent. Walsh looked at them seriously. This is what the railroad will use. They'll argue that the entire claim has been invalid since 1847. But I'm not dead, James said, anger rising. I'm right here. That certificate is a lie. Proving that in court will be difficult, Walsh warned. Webb's testimony from 1847 versus your word now. You've been gone 30 years. People will question whether you're really James Caldwell or just someone claiming to be him to steal the land. Emma stared at the document. Why would Webb do this? What did he gain? Walsh pulled out another paper. After your claim was declared abandoned, guess who filed a new claim on this property? Webb, James said flatly. Webb. He claimed it in 1848 but never occupied it. Probably couldn't because Sarah was already here and wouldn't leave. He eventually let the claim lapse, but, Walsh paused, he never filed the proper abandonment papers. Technically, he might still have a legal claim to this land. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Webb hadn't just threatened them. He'd laid legal groundwork decades ago to steal the land James had abandoned. So what do we do? Emma's voice was strained. We prove James is who he says he is, Walsh said. And we prove Webb's death certificate was fraudulent. But it won't be easy. We'll need witnesses, documentation, evidence that James has been alive this whole time. I have my trapping licenses, James said. Records from Fort Bridger, other places, from after 1847, Walsh interrupted. Which could help if we can find them. But we need more. We need people who knew you before and after 1847. People who can swear you're the same James Caldwell. James thought hard. There was a trader named Samuel Ross. We did business for years. He knew me from 1840 to 1860. Is he still alive? I don't know. Last I heard, he retired to Fort Laramie. I'll find him, Walsh said, making notes. Anyone else? Old trappers, James said. Mountain men I worked with. But most are dead or scattered. Find whoever you can. Walsh gathered his papers. We've got maybe 2 weeks before the railroad pushes this to court. If we can't prove your identity and invalidate that death certificate, Emma loses everything. After Walsh left, Emma and James sat in heavy silence. The fight for their land had just become far more complicated than either had imagined. I'm sorry, James said quietly. If I'd been here, if I'd never left, don't, Emma cut him off. We can't change the past. We can only deal with what we have now, which is Webb holding fraudulent papers and 30 years of my absence working against us. Emma looked at him steadily. We also have you here now, alive, real. That has to count for something. Maybe not enough. Then we make it enough. Emma stood. You said you wanted to prove you're staying. Here's your chance. We find your witnesses. We prove you're alive. We show Webb and the railroad and everyone else that this land belongs to the Caldwells, and no amount of legal trickery will change that. James felt something shift inside him. Fear giving way to determination. You're right, we fight. With lawyers and witnesses and whatever else it takes.
And if that doesn't work?
James met his daughter's gaze. Then we fight with everything we have. But we don't give up. Not on this land. Not on each other. Emma nodded, and for the first time since James had returned, he saw something like trust in her eyes. Not complete trust, that would take time. But the beginning of it, the possibility. They spent the evening making plans. James wrote down every name he could remember. Traders, trappers, military men he'd dealt with over 30 years. Emma compiled evidence of Sarah's occupation and improvements. Together, they built their defense against a claim filed in darkness and lies. As night fell, James took first watch again. He sat on the porch with his rifle, looking out at the valley Sarah had claimed and Emma had maintained. This land was worth fighting for, not just because it was valuable, but because it represented something larger, the idea that honest work and faithful stewardship meant something. That a promise made, even one kept by a woman alone, still held weight. He thought about Webb filing that false death certificate, thinking James would never return to challenge it. Webb had been right for 23 years, but not anymore. James Caldwell was home. He was alive, and he would fight for every inch of ground Sarah had held in his name. Inside the cabin, Emma sat at the table with her mother's journal open to the last page. Sarah's final words stared up at her. "Take care of Emma, love her as she deserves. And when the mountains call to you again, because they will, remember that true strength isn't in answering every call, but in knowing which ones matter most." Emma closed the journal softly. "He's trying, Mama," she whispered. "I think he's really trying." Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, indifferent to human struggles and hopes. But in the valley below, two people prepared to fight for what was theirs, armed with truth and determination, and the memory of a woman who had never stopped believing in second chances. Webb stood slowly, all eyes turning to him. His confidence had cracked, replaced by something harder and more desperate. "Your Honor, I signed that certificate in good faith." James had disappeared into the mountains. No one had seen him for months. "I assumed—" "You assumed," Judge Thatcher repeated. "But you didn't confirm. You didn't recover a body. You simply declared him dead and filed papers that would invalidate his claim." The judge's voice grew stern. "Mr. Webb, did you benefit from Mr. Caldwell's supposed death?" Harrison jumped up. "Your Honor, Mr. Webb isn't on trial here." "He is now," Judge Thatcher said flatly. "He signed a legal document declaring a man dead. That man is sitting in my courtroom, very much alive. Someone lied, and I intend to find out why." He looked at Webb again. "Answer the question. Did you benefit?" Webb's jaw clenched. "I filed a claim on the abandoned property in 1848, yes. But I never occupied it because Sarah Mills refused to leave. Eventually, I let the claim lapse." "Because you couldn't force her out," James said quietly. "Because she was stronger than you expected. Mr. Caldwell," Judge Thatcher warned, "you'll have your chance to speak. Mr. Webb, why did you declare James Caldwell dead?" The courtroom was absolutely silent. Webb looked at his lawyers, at the railroad men behind him, then at James. Something ugly crossed his face. "Because he deserved it," Webb said finally. "He abandoned that land, abandoned that woman, walked away from everything like it meant nothing. So yes, I declared him dead. The land was wasted on him." "That wasn't your decision to make," Judge Thatcher said. "Someone had to make it." Webb's composure shattered. James Caldwell was a coward who ran from responsibility. That land could have been mine, could have been developed properly. Instead, it sat there with a woman barely surviving on it, all because Caldwell couldn't commit to anything but his precious mountains. James stood, his voice level but hard. "You're right about one thing. I was a coward. I ran from responsibility, abandoned the woman I loved, missed 30 years with my daughter. But I'm here now, and I'm not running anymore. You stole my legal standing through fraud, Webb. You tried to erase me from existence because I wasn't there to stop you." "You gave me the opportunity," Webb shot back. "You were gone, James. For 30 years you were dead to everyone who mattered. I just made it official by committing fraud," Judge Thatcher said sharply. "Mr. Harrison, your client has just admitted to filing a false death certificate for personal gain. That's a criminal offense." Harrison looked stricken. "Your Honor, we had no knowledge of this. The railroad relied on these documents in good faith. The railroad hired Mr. Webb, knowing his history with this property," Walsh interjected. "They knew he had a personal interest in acquiring this land." "That's not good faith. That's deliberate." Judge Thatcher held up his hand for silence. "Gentlemen, here's what I see. James Caldwell filed a legitimate claim in 1835. He abandoned that claim, which was wrong but not illegal. Clayton Webb filed a false death certificate in 1847, which is illegal. Sarah Mills Caldwell maintained the property for 30 years in James's name, which shows clear intent to preserve the claim for her family. James Caldwell is now returned and can prove his identity through multiple witnesses and documentary evidence." He looked at Harrison. "The railroad's case rests on a fraudulent document. That's not a valid basis for claiming property. Mr. Caldwell, stand please." James stood, his heart pounding. You abandoned this land for 30 years. That shows poor character and poorer judgment. But thanks to Sarah Mills Caldwell's faithful stewardship, the claim was never truly abandoned. She improved it, occupied it, and paid taxes on it in your name. In the eyes of the law, that constitutes continuous family occupation. Judge Thatcher picked up his gavel. Therefore, I rule that the original claim remains valid. The property belongs to James Caldwell and his heir, Emma Caldwell. The death certificate filed by Clayton Webb is declared fraudulent and void. All subsequent claims based on that document are invalid. He brought the gavel down with a sharp crack. Mr. Webb, I'm referring your case to the Territorial Marshal for prosecution on charges of fraud and false documentation. Mr. Harrison, the railroad's petition to acquire this property is denied. The courtroom erupted. Emma grabbed James's arm, tears streaming down her face. Walsh was shaking hands with Marcus and Samuel Ross. Across the aisle, Webb sat frozen, his face ashen, while Harrison gathered papers with sharp, angry movements. Judge Thatcher banged his gavel again. Order! This hearing is concluded. As people filed out, Webb caught James's eye. For a moment, raw hatred flashed between them. Then Webb turned and walked away, flanked by railroad lawyers already planning his defense. Outside the courthouse, Emma threw her arms around James in a fierce embrace. We won! Papa, we won! It was the first time she'd called him that. James held his daughter, feeling 30 years of absence and guilt begin to crack under the weight of this moment. Earned, real, true. Your mother won, James said quietly. She's the one who held the claim all these years. She's the one who never gave up. She knew you'd come back, Emma said, pulling away to look at him. Somehow she knew. Mrs. Patterson pushed through the crowd, her sons behind her. Emma, James, well done indeed. Others came forward, neighbors, townsfolk who'd known Sarah, people who'd been watching the railroad's expansion with worry. They shook James's hand, congratulated Emma, praised Walsh's legal work. Marcus clapped James on the shoulder. You did it, old friend. Sarah would be proud. Sarah would say it took me long enough, James replied, but he was smiling. Samuel Ross joined them. Glad I could help. That Webb always was a snake. Good to see him get what's coming. As the crowd thinned, Walsh pulled James and Emma aside. You should know, the railroad won't give up. They'll appeal, try other routes, maybe even attempt to buy neighboring properties to pressure you. This victory is real, but the fight isn't over. We know, Emma said. But we're ready. Together, James added, meeting his daughter's eyes. Walsh nodded, satisfied. Together. That's good. That's what Sarah would have wanted. They rode home in the afternoon sun, all four of them. James, Emma, Marcus, and Samuel Ross, who'd agreed to stay a few days before heading back to Fort Laramie. The valley looked different to James now, more vivid somehow. This was his land, his daughter's inheritance, Sarah's legacy, and he would protect it. Back at the cabin, Emma prepared a celebratory meal while the men unsaddled horses and told stories on the porch. James found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in longer than he could remember. As evening fell and Marcus and Ross retired to the barn, Emma and James sat alone on the porch. The stars emerged one by one, ancient and constant. What happens now? Emma asked. We rebuild, James said. The bunkhouse first. Then maybe expand. Add another building, get the way station running at full capacity again. Build what your mother dreamed of building, and you'll stay, even though it's settled, even though the fight's over. James looked at his daughter, Sarah's daughter, and felt certain of something for the first time in 30 years. I'm not staying because of the fight, Emma. I'm staying because this is home. Because you're here. Because I spent 3 decades looking for something I'd already found and thrown away. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver ring. Mama wanted you to have this. So do I. James took the ring, feeling its weight, not just metal but promise, commitment, the future he'd once been too afraid to claim. He slipped it onto his finger, where it fit perfectly after all these years. Thank you, he said softly. Emma rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat together under the stars Sarah had watched alone for so long. The valley was quiet, except for the creek's gentle murmur, and the horses settling for the night. Peace, hard-won and real, settled over the land like a blessing. Inside the cabin, on the mantel beside the wooden horse Emma had played with as a child, Sarah's final letter lay folded. Its words had been read, its wisdom accepted, its forgiveness claimed. James Caldwell was home. Not the cabin, though that mattered. Not the land, though that mattered too. He was home in the only way that truly counted, accepted by his daughter, at peace with his past, ready for whatever future they would build together, and somewhere, in whatever place holds the spirits of the departed. Sarah Mills, Caldwell smiled. 6 months passed like water over stones, steady, shaping, transforming. Winter came to the valley with its blanket of snow, then melted into spring. And now summer warmed the land that James and Emma had fought so hard to keep. The new bunkhouse stood completed, larger than the old one, with room for multiple families. James had built it with his own hands, Emma working beside him, and together they'd raised walls that would stand for decades. The sign above the door read what Emma had carved with careful letters: Caldwell Station, Esther 1835. Below that, in smaller script, founded by Sarah Mills Caldwell. James stood in the yard at sunset, watching Emma work with a young horse in the corral. She had her mother's patience, her mother's gentle firmness. The horse, a wild Mustang she'd traded for, was learning to trust, step by careful step. "She's got your touch," Marcus called from the porch, where he sat smoking his pipe. The old trapper had stayed on through winter, claiming he was too old for another season in the high country. James suspected he simply wanted company, wanted to be part of something living and growing, instead of slowly fading alone in a mountain cabin. "She's got Sarah's touch," James corrected. "I'm just learning," and he was learning, not just about horses, but about being a father, about showing up each day, about keeping promises, about the small, steady work of building trust that had been broken 30 years ago. A wagon appeared on the eastern road, the third family this week seeking shelter at Caldwell Station. Word had spread that Emma Caldwell ran an honest way station with good food and safe lodging. The business Sarah had started was thriving under Emma's care. "With James's help, I'll get them settled," James said, walking to meet the wagon. The family was young, husband, wife, 2 small children, heading to Oregon Territory, hoping for land of their own. They looked exhausted and weary, the way all travelers looked after weeks on the trail. "Welcome to Caldwell Station," James said warmly. "You folks look like you could use a hot meal and a soft bed." The woman's face brightened with relief. "We heard this was a good place to stop. Best place between here and Fort Bridger," James said with pride. "My daughter runs it. Come on, let's get you settled." As he led them to the bunkhouse, James caught Emma watching him from the corral. She smiled, that smile that still surprised him, still felt like a gift he didn't quite deserve, and nodded approval. That evening, after the travelers were fed and bedded down, Emma and James sat on the porch, as had become their custom. Marcus had retired early, leaving them alone with the soft sounds of night settling over the valley. "Letter came today," Emma said, pulling an envelope from her pocket. "From Walsh. The railroads dropped all appeals. They're routing through the southern pass instead. It's over, Papa, really over." James felt relief wash through him. "Sarah would be proud of you. Of how you fought for this place." "We fought," Emma corrected. "Together." "Together," James agreed. Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "I've been thinking about something. The way station is doing well. Better than Mama ever managed, actually, with both of us running it. We've got money saved. What are you thinking?" "An orchard, like Mama always wanted. Apple trees, maybe some pears, and," Emma hesitated, "maybe a small school. There are families settling nearby now. Their children need education. Mama taught me, but not every child has that." James felt something warm expand in his chest. "Your mother would love that. She always believed in education." "I'd need help," Emma said. "Someone to teach. I can read and write fine, but teaching a classroom, that's different." "We'll find someone," James said. "Maybe a young teacher heading west, looking for a place to settle. We've got the room, the resources. It could work." They sat planning into the night, building Sarah's dream forward into something even larger. The way station would expand, yes, but also become a true center for the growing community. A place of learning and growth, not just rest for travelers. Later, as James prepared for bed in what had once been Sarah's room, Emma had insisted he take it, saying her mother would want him there. He noticed something new on the mantel. The wooden cradle had been moved from the corner, placed prominently where everyone could see it, and inside the cradle lay a note in Emma's handwriting. For the next generation. James picked up the note, reading it again. The next generation. Emma was thinking ahead, imagining a future with children of her own. Grandchildren for James. Family continuing forward. Built on the foundation Sarah had laid and Emma had protected. He carefully placed the note back in the cradle and looked around the room. So much had changed, yet so much remained the same. The walls he'd built still stood strong. The fireplace he'd laid still gave warmth. But everything was different now, filled with life and purpose and the dailiness of family. On the table sat Marcus's ledger, which the old trapper had gifted to Emma. "Your history," Marcus had said. "Keep it safe." Beside it lay Sarah's journal, Emma's constant companion. Past and present, woven together, James walked to the window and looked out at the valley. The moon was rising, painting everything in silver light. The corral where Emma's horses stood, the new bunkhouse. The garden Emma tended, the creek that had run through this land since before humans came and would run long after they were gone. This was home. Not just the place, but the feeling, the belonging. The purpose. He thought about the man he'd been 30 years ago, restless, afraid, running toward emptiness while fleeing from everything that mattered. That man was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned too late but not too late what actually gives life meaning. A soft knock at the door. "Papa, you still awake?" "Come in." Emma entered, wearing her nightdress, looking younger and more vulnerable than she ever allowed herself to appear during the day. "I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about Mama, wishing she could see all this, see us together." James opened his arms and Emma came to him, letting herself be held like the child she'd never gotten to be with him. "She sees," James said quietly. "Somehow, somewhere she knows. And she's proud of you, Emma, so proud. And you? Is she proud of you?" James considered the question seriously. "I hope so. I'll never know for certain. But I hope, that she'd see I finally became the man I should have been, that I'm trying every day to deserve the second chance she gave me by keeping my claim alive." Emma pulled back, looking up at him. "She loved you. Even at the end, even after everything, she loved you. Her journal makes that clear, I know. And I loved her. Still do in my way. But Emma," he cupped his daughter's face gently, "my life now is about you, about building what she started. About being the father you deserved all along." "You are," Emma said softly. "You are that father now." They stood together in the moonlight, and James felt something settle inside him, the last piece of guilt, the last whisper of doubt, finally finding peace. The next morning, James woke to find Emma already up working in the garden. He joined her, and together they planted seeds for the fall harvest. Simple work, satisfying work. The kind of work that builds a life. "I was thinking," Emma said, as she patted soil around a tomato plant, "we should put up a marker for Mama, something proper, in that spot by the creek where she liked to sit. That's a good idea. What would you want it to say?" Emma was quiet for a moment. "Sarah Mills Caldwell. Beloved mother, faithful steward, builder of dreams." "Perfect," James said, his voice thick. "I'll carve it myself. Make it beautiful." She'd like that. They worked in companionable silence, father and daughter, building the future on the foundation of the past. The sun climbed higher, warming the valley, and from the bunkhouse came the sounds of the traveling family, preparing to continue their journey westward. Life continued. Days turned to weeks to months. The orchard was planted. 20 apple trees and 10 pear trees, which would take years to bear fruit but would feed families for generations. A young school teacher arrived, a woman from Boston seeking adventure, and Emma hired her on the spot. By autumn, 12 children were learning their letters in a converted storage building. Marcus passed peacefully in his sleep one winter night, a smile on his weathered face. They buried him on the hillside, overlooking the valley, where he could see the mountains he'd loved. He died happy, Emma said. He died home, and through it all James stayed. Through harsh winters and dry summers, through difficulties and small triumphs, through the grinding daily work of running a way station and the quiet joy of evening conversations on the porch. He stayed because staying was what mattered, because running had cost him everything that counted, and staying had given him everything he'd never known he needed. 2 years after the trial, Emma married a rancher from the next valley over, a good man named Thomas, who reminded James painfully of himself at that age, but steadier, more grounded. James walked Emma down an aisle of wildflowers, gave her hand to Thomas, and welcomed him into the family with full heart. When Emma's first child was born, a daughter, she named her Sarah. James held his granddaughter and wept, feeling the circle complete. Sarah Mills Caldwell's legacy would continue, carried forward by the granddaughter she'd never met, raised in the home she'd protected, surrounded by the love she'd kept alive through 30 years of absence, and on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the valley lay peaceful under the stars. James would sit on the porch and talk to Sarah. He'd tell her about Emma's happiness, about little Sarah's first smile, about the orchard coming into bloom. He'd tell her about the students learning in her name, about the way station thriving, about the community growing around the foundation she'd laid. He'd tell her he was sorry. Still sorry, always sorry for the years he'd missed and the burden she'd carried alone, and he'd thank her. Thank her for her strength, her faithfulness, her refusal to give up on a dream even when the dreamer had abandoned it. Thank her for raising Emma to be strong and kind and willing to forgive. Thank her for keeping the door unlocked, for maintaining his claim, for believing somehow, against all evidence, that he might someday find his way home. "I'm home now, Sarah," he'd whisper to the night. "I'm home and I'm staying. You can rest now. Emma's safe. The land is safe. Everything you built, everything you fought for, it's all going to be all right." And in the silence that followed, in the gentle movement of wind through the grass and the distant cry of an owl hunting, James would feel something like peace, something like forgiveness, something like the whispered response he'd been seeking for 30 years. "Welcome home, James. Welcome home." The valley held them all, the living and the memory of the dead, in its ancient embrace. The cabin still stood stronger than ever. The creek still ran, eternal and clear. And above it all, the mountains James had once loved stood silent and beautiful, no longer calling him away from what mattered most. He was home. Finally, truly, completely home, and that was exactly where he would stay.